Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we have some tracks off of an album called Side Effects May Include. This is from Odyssey. 3 tracks off of this album on Spotify, and if we switch over to here, we've got Crying in the Club that we're going to be listening to today, as well as Spin Back and Shreveport versus Everybody. So without further ado, we're going to listen through these tracks from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go with Crying in the Club.
To the point where I can't breathe. Got me to the point where I can't live. And I know you wonder where I might be, but you the only one that vibe with me.
I mean, like, it's straight to the point with the vocals. There's very little filler and intro with the instrumental parts. Really nice combination of different key, bass, percussion elements.
I can't breathe. Got me to the point where I can't live.
A bit of vocal modulation there.
Took time and you mad at love. Took time and you had enough. I'm through the pain, get tatted up. Remind yourself that you bad as fuck. Took time and you mad at love. Took time and you had enough. I'm through the pain, get tatted up. Remind yourself that you bad as fuck. Crying tears inside this club. Crying tears inside this cast. I've been through too much fake love. Should've known this shit wouldn't last.
Yeah, no, I like the style of it. I think the modulation makes the voice more of sort of like, well, is equally a sort of synthy element, which works well with the misty keys in there, the motif we've got going there with the bass popping off and the drums. But it's more the story about someone who's just struggling with a situation they're in, crying in the club, just having a real rough time with it because of like relationship issues or simply because they just feel like they're missing something in their lives.
I feel like I'm balanced. How you left your energy. You know what that meant to me. I thought you ain't hoping me. Ay. I think, babe, well, I thought you knew. Ay. I'm back, I'm little bitch. You must thought I was from the 318 to the 210. Niggas knew I was chosen when the beat on go. Shawty wet name in the phone H2O. Shawty wet name in the phone H2O. What you back? Shawty on side,
Slick
I never
flow.
hit you back. Came in the city, now I can never lack. Hop in the bin, I hop in the jag. You got me to the point where I can't breathe. You got me to the point where I can't live. And I know they wonder where I might be, but know that you only want to vibe with me. Got me to the point where I can't breathe. You got me to the point where I can't live. And I know you wonder where
Great bass
I might
resonance.
be, but you the only one that vibe with me.
I mean, that just shows a really firm understanding of music production, studio side of things as well, just with the filtering of that, with the airiness of the vocals kind of contrasting each other. It's an interesting vibe shift when we have that same sort of theme repeated, having different instruments kind of moving forward to kind of represent it in a new way. It's well done. Slowing it down. It's kind of slowing down the vinyl, right? It's a nice way of finishing it off, actually. It's kind of classy. I actually kind of like both speeds. I like the speed we had initially for most of the track and then slowing down the tempo, but I think it just allowed you to really kind of sit there and simmer in that situation that they're in, allowed you to sort of, like, time is slowing down as you can't breathe, as he was talking about, you know. It sounds like a really kind of rough time for them. Side effects may include. I'm sure there's like a wider context for this album that we'll probably explore as we go along. But for a first impression, I'm really happy with it, and I think that honestly deserves more attention than this. It's good quality stuff. But we've got the next track here, Spin Back, featuring Asaya Polk, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll listen through that one as well. some sort of jazzy woodwind elements there.
Yeah, 2 years back, I was in the DMs back. Yeah, I ain't have cash, now I got a hot blue bag. Now you want me spin back, ain't know you made move like that. Yeah, ain't know you made move like that. What you have in mind, got you bad tonight. It's been half of the night on your back and your side, babe.
I mean, like, when I hear this, I think, how could they really improve it? The quality of the flow of the vocals, how clear the words are coming through despite the heavy modulation and all that, and the legato effects that come from that. The really intriguing theme behind it, the mistiness and the emotional uncertainty of it, it's really good.
I'm reloaded, no, they envy me. Okay, she got an accent, I'm in the ocean, think I'm in too deep. Swim, I'm in New York and I ain't coming out till they call me MVP. Okay, fuck all these niggas and fuck all these bitches, they draining my energy. What you have in mind? Thought of the camera, I'm being it. Girl, you bad tonight. I'm in the back and I'm needing the money. Spend like half a night for the nigga, cause I got a book. On your back and your side, babe. On your back and your side, babe. Chameleon, guap look like a guana. Serial kill, that pussy diamond. Ain't tryna be your prince charming. I'm in the field, but I'm not a farmer. Most of these niggas, they down with no water, babe. I say most of these niggas, they down with no water. They say I rap in the sauna. Me and Big Bro used to trap in the Honda, ayy. I took a L, no Rhonda. We got the sticks like Cosmo and Wanda, ayy. The red of my eyes, the red of the scenes. Lay in the rest, they ain't ready to see him. Fucking your bit, all it takes is a DM.
I mean, there's obviously quite a lot of words to take in just because of the speed of the flow. When I say the words are coming through clearly, they are, for sure. It's just sort of taking the time whilst you're actively listening to it to also try and piece the puzzle together. It does require a bit of thought afterwards, I think, to really get the full picture, and maybe even repeat listens.
I was in the DMs back. Yeah, ain't have cash, now I got a hot blue bag. Now you want me spin back, ain't know you made move like that. Yeah, ain't know you made move like that. What you have in mind, got you bad tonight. It's been half of the night on your back and your side, babe. It's been half of the night on your back and your side, babe.
No, that give me leverage. Treat you like you sneezing, baby. You know I gotta bless you. You stressed out, you ain't gotta drop sit in this Tesla. All my niggas strapped, baby, you know that you protect. Back then she ain't want me, but now that I'm sexy, you wanna come fuck on a kid. Yeah. It ain't a mistake if you begging to fuck me again, baby. I sent that wire to your bank and took them wires off your headphones. You just upgraded cause your last nigga's a damn bum.
Damn, man. We're not holding back, are we? We're not holding back.
This makes me not wanna hold you. Damage to my brain, I'm insane. I'm on my own too without you, baby. Say you love my songs, but I don't hear them things around you, baby. I could love you long, cause I don't feel the same without you, baby. Yeah, this pain's a long time coming. 2 years back, yeah, I was in the DMs, bad. I ain't had cash, yeah, and I got no blue bag. Don't try to take from me, baby, please don't do that, yeah.
2 years back, I was in the DMs back. Yeah, I ain't have cash, now I got a hot blue bag. Now you want me spin back, ain't know you made move like that. Yeah, ain't know you made move like that.
I mean, like, just sorry to interrupt there. I know it's a bit awkward because we're probably going back into the last hook of the track, but I just like when musicians remove the low end, the bass and drum elements there. They allow it to kind of hover, just make great use of that space, remove part of the frequency spectrum focus. And it just kind of refreshes things for the listener because they're maybe not expecting things to kind of get a little bit lighter before it goes back into the full 808s and the kicks and the samples there. It's a smart stuff.
You have in mind, got you bad tonight. It's been half of the night on your back and your side, babe.
What did he say? Spending the night on the back and sides? I think I know what the track's about, but I'm not really sure, and I want to quickly clarify it. I like the fade out at the end, though. That's really classy. You know, I think the fade out at the end's really classy. You know, you have a 3-minute something track. You know, you've got to finish at some point within that 2 to 4 minute sweet spot just to keep people engaged, unless you've got a wide amount of variety. Within either the vocal performance, like with the style or tone of it, or the structure or different chord progressions and themes, etc. Or you've got other lead instrumental elements that you can kind of carry a solo forward with. Is this song about spinning back as in going back for another round in bed or something like that? Are we talking about like sex and all that kind of stuff? I could be wrong. I mean, obviously, you know, I'm no prude, but also I think that's basically what it's about. But there was also like a talk of like the emotional connection to that person. So it's not just that we're getting in the person for the physical attraction potentially. It's also because we'd want to continue to do stuff with them longer. Because we really kind of like want to feel them. They would love the vibe that we have with them, you know. I just want to give a shout out to Zaya's clean vocals in their section. I think he's a tremendous singer. I think it was a nice contrast to what we've had so far with Odyssey. I think there's a little bit of vocal fry there. There was some definitely some passion in that performance there, and I think they worked really well together. So good on both of them for nailing this track, this collaboration on Spin Back. That was cool. Then finally, we'll go Shreveport versus Everybody. Now, this has Odyssey, Dandra, as well as Max Swans. Track number 3 for today.
Once again, we going Shreveport versus Everybody. Yeah, Cooper Road, The Grove, Stoner Hill, everybody.
How do you describe this theme?
Yeah, ratchets poppin', pussy niggas hating, trying to head poppin'. No, I won't invest in you, but you know I come through and I leg lock.
We're not rushing into it, eh? I like the fact that we're allowing... So we've got some vocal chops. We've obviously got a kind of a bassy, stabby thing going on there. We've probably got a pad there as well as drums. Maybe got some light keys or something in the background there. An ominous minor tonality to the theme with along some extra sort of like feedback and commentary over top of the intro. Let's go.
We going Shreveport versus everybody. Me and Dondre don't need no x-ray, bitch, you know our body. I was with Ducks in a hottie. Being want me to sell my soul to her before the Illuminati. Speak down on I decide this bitch and I go kamikaze. Don't play about my paper, but I wish I could do origami. Hanging out the whip, was hopping out thugging that raceway from the Ratchet City. Many don't consider this a safe place. Bitches hit me up to get they day made, but I ain't never hear from you on my cake day. This for the loss, dedicated to pay. And I was looking for your father on that same day. Say he ain't make it, but he tried to maintain. Yeah.
I mean, it was short and sweet. Came in and out. Strong percussion pushing us forward after a little bit of a break. What more can you ask for?
Once again, we going Shreveport versus everybody.
Is Shreveport where they're from?
Stoner Hill, everybody. Yeah, ratchets poppin', pussy niggas hating, trying to head poppin'. No, I won't invest in you, but you know I come through and I leg lock.
And if need be, you know where to find me. Out here where shit gets serious. For the thrill and the rush, the adrenaline. Strangers in these parts, you gotta get rid of them. We got you at the edge of your seats. Cause you not entertained by the mess in the streets. I done swam in the deep and crept through the creeps. And stepped with the steppers when stepping wasn't as steep. The city been boiling for too long, got time overdue. But given the situation, shit, we right on cue. They begging for something new and y'all stuck in the loop. Hey, luckily we got a city full of heavy hitters on the way.
Yeah. It's the boy, come and step in line. Make these other rappers formation just to renaissance. The city got a new era coming, don't you be afraid. I was a rock boy until I hit him with the tidal wave. 318 dark night, you gotta keep the light away. It was going backwards till we came through, but now it's safe. It's us against the world, nobody can fuck with us. Concerned about blowing while y'all searching up the bubble butts. Yeah, it's God's son, the rap savior. Girl, call me chiropractor because I am the bad breaker. I can fade all of you niggas, but I ain't gotta tape them. All of my section break the records like we are the Lakers. The game is full of imposters. Y'all get confused with the crabs and the lobsters. Playing with me, gon' have me moving like a mobster. I'm hoary in the forest, so you know I gotta rob you.
Just before we continue, a couple of things. One, I love how things are cut and chopped with this thing. It's such an aggressive vibe to the atmosphere. It lends itself really well. And I think coupled with the concept of Shreveport versus everyone, I assume that Odyssey, Dandra, and Max Swans are from that part. And we're trying to say, look, you know, like, this is what we have to offer. You know, don't don't take us for being, subpar or average. We're going to show you what we're made of. I think that the theme there with that kind of standoffishness reflects that tone well. I think it's some smart stuff, I think it's a relaxing theme outside of that with the boom, 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 boom. That motif isn't particularly dead on. It's just how things are.
But this rap shit is child's play. Any nigga can get a tool. Don't work the wild way. They say pulling up. Well, I'm in the driveway. Make these hoes sing all of my keys like they shy day. Want to chip off of my style, but that's just how I lay. Going for 34 like I'm playing in the Barclays. The best rapper in the world, that's what God say. You know just how I play.
And that's the last track off the album. We've got stories. Well, this is conclusion stuff, I suppose, but we've just got the last one reminding everyone of where these guys are from, potentially, to not take them for granted. And I assume that this is Odyssey trying to feature other musicians who are up and coming, and I think that's a beautiful thing to do, If you've got other people in your neighborhood and you want to be like, yo, check out them, it can be difficult to get exposure otherwise, So well done on that front. I think that's really cool, especially when they can obviously rap well. I mean, Dandra and Max Swans, I'm not familiar with them as musicians or a lot of what they do, but I think they got to show off their personality there. It was well executed. There were no real kind of weaknesses whatsoever within the stories that they told, nor in the performances themselves. It was easy to kind of tell who was who to an extent, like I could hear different rappers, even if I'm not intimately familiar with their own voices apart from Odyssey at this point, because Odyssey's been with us the whole way throughout this review. But you know what I mean. I think it's really cool. And welcome to the conclusion of my review of this album. These 3 tracks, side effects may include, and these tracks were Crying in the Club, Spin Back, as well as Shreveport versus Everybody. Now, what do I think that this album is about in general? I think this is more of kind of a play on words of the album being the medication, the side effects may include. Maybe this is Odyssey living their life, and these are side effects of their existence, how they themselves are and how they affect others. It could even be a comment on him taking medication and the experiences that he's had during that time. There's different ways you can interpret it. I believe it is going to probably depend on 2 things. 1, how imaginative you are, and 2, whether or not you've heard the entire album. And I think that for something like this, I think that it's really good just to kind of take the time to listen through all of it, especially if you did like these 3 tracks that we've heard today. With that in mind, I think it's an interesting thing to make an album about, and I think that it was well executed. The vocals across the board, at least from what I heard from Odyssey, were really well handled. Great flow, clean clean display of vocabulary, and the words came through clearly. And I think that we had a great vocal technique as well. We had a personality to our performance which reflected the subject matter that we were talking about, and it never felt weird or lacking in context with what we had there. So there was typically a connection between how we were rapping or how we were vocalizing and the story that we were telling there, so that's cool. It was typically a very calm and comfortable performance, and I think that it was emblematic. Hang on. It was emblematic of a musician who simply is comfortable enough to make an album at this point. They clearly are experienced on the mic, and they're doing something that they're happy and proud of, and they're expressing themselves in a way that is genuine and authentic. And I think that to be able to write an album with 15 songs in it is something to be proud of. It is an achievement. It is very difficult to write an album, let alone a compelling one. So shout out to Odyssey for their vocal work on here as a singer, as a rapper, and the stories they told. I think there was a great connection between those. I think that when Isaiah Polk as well as Dandra and Max Swans were in the mix and they were collaborating, featuring, there were no weak points either. We clearly chose people who would fit both our style, and it would also exemplify and showcase their strengths as performers. And they got to have their time in the spotlight without being kind of like filtered or kind of messed with. What didn't seem like Odyssey was trying to have the spotlight all the time, which is great. In fact, there's a lot of different features throughout this album, which I think is really cool. It's great to be sharing that with other people. So yeah, vocals were great, well done. You know, I think that outside of the vocals, the tracks themselves were typically between that 2 to 4 minute sweet spot. So that'll be nice and easy for a listener to take in, a bit like popcorn, especially, you know, crying in the club underneath 3 minutes. It's nice and short. I can understand why it's got some playtime. In addition to that, I think that the instrumental themes here, we had a predominant focus on like drums and the bass and some key parts, maybe some woodwind elements for melodic leads there outside of the vocals that were still a sub-layer because the vocals were the focal point. We might have had some other synth parts as well, and maybe some pads, but ultimately it was a very low-key, kind of almost lo-fi-ish focus here. But without the guitars, we didn't really have guitars, which was interesting, but I liked that the color of the keys in the mid-range with the bass and the low end. Even if the bass was sometimes a little more laid back, a little more sort of like classic harpish or stabbish, and sometimes we had a bit of a free-for-all with how aggressive some of the 808s are, and that's absolutely fine. We knew to kind of take those lower elements away to let the higher elements float there with the vocals occasionally, just for a bit of a range there compositionally and dynamically, which was cool. The motifs in general were fairly bittersweet sounding. We never really committed to like super duper negative or angry. It was more sort of menacing at best, like with Shreveport versus Everybody, with like the chops that we had. That's equally as much a studio production thing as a songwriting thing, where we kind of studied the flow of the track to kind of catch the listener's attention and kind of jab at them a little bit as if we were fighting back or punching. And I think that was cool. I think that was a really cool move there. It made sense with Shreveport versus Everybody, considering that we're trying to tell everybody why they should pay attention to us and not to take the piss, you know. It's good. It's good stuff. I think that the themes made sense with what we were telling the stories about. Things were well considered and emotion and very mature sounding. The composition was solid. We had interesting themes that we didn't really need to do much more with than we had. We knew when to leave. We knew to have enough verses per person in the features in order to be able to have their best assets on display. We didn't overstay our welcome. And ultimately, there was a great sense of stylistic connection between the various tracks that we heard today, which means that as an album as a whole, you can understand that they're all a part of the same album. So the risk of not having a sort of like a stylistic connection or a consistency there is that it can sound like a whole bunch of different ideas just kind of like flung into an album, and they can sound disjointed because of that. But we didn't have that here, so Odyssey did very well. I'm very happy with it. So I think, you know, the themes made sense with the stories, the vocals made sense with the stories, the hard way that the vocals harmonize on top there, especially with stuff like from Isaiah with their clean vocals, the melodies there, there's some of the fry and the raunchiness there, but also just genuinely how sincere and well considered it all sounded. There was a great sense of synergy among all the elements there, and I don't think there was a note out of place. Finally, the studio recording, mixing, and mastering was really well handled. I have no complaints really about how that was done. We simply had music that was well produced. The vocals were nice and clear in the mix, and I liked how they were EQ'd and filtered. I liked the bit of vocal modulation we had on Odyssey's parts, a bit of meta-tuning there. I liked that Isaiah wasn't overly saturated in effects and that they were just allowed to sing and sound the way they are. And I think that Dandra and Max Swans, they were handled and featured really well as well. I think that we knew when to add a little bit of extra coloration and sort of pizzazz to a piece, not because it necessarily needed it, but just because we liked how it sounded. And we knew how to not let that affect how it interacted with the rest of the elements in the composition and the studio mix. We understood that there needed to be a sense of equilibrium there, and we managed to handle that adeptly. The vocals were filtered well in amongst the keys, any sort of woodwind or lead elements there, which were in the center field. Things were nicely notched in the stereo and the frequency spectrum there, with the bass being well handled in the low end, and the drums side chaining when they needed to, and the chopping as well, not being too overbearing or too kind of blunt. Things were nice and wide in the stereo field as well, like bits of the percussion were panned around the place, as well as some vocal repeaters that went out to the sides. In addition to that, we had a nice amount of dynamic range to this. Things weren't the same loudness all the time. We even had some fade outs and bits of volume automation at the end. And it was still, things were leveled well though. And it was nice and loud without pumping, so limiting compression were handled. And I mean, Effectively, this is my review. Quite a positive review to be honest, of Side Effects May Include, which is an album from Odyssey. The 3 tracks, Crying in the Club, Spin Back featuring Isaiah Polk, and Shreveport vs. Everybody featuring Dandre and Max Swans. And hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show some love via the various social medias and a Spotify page, and stay cool, stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as either hell more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next review. Spiderhands out.